Chapter 8. Temporal Disruption. Arnie's fist was heading straight for my nose. I could see it coming, inch by inch by inch, as if it were moving in slow motion. I was so boggled by what was happening, I almost didn't realise that this was my chance to get out of the way. Finally, I ducked. Arnie's fist shot past my shoulder and smashed into the wall. "Oh!" he screamed. "What'd you do that for, Brett?" Like it was my duty to stand there and let him cream me. I got ready to run, figuring he was really going to get me now. Instead, he started crying. That was when I noticed the blood streaming down his knuckles. Cradling his injured hand, he ran off towards Miss Maloney. Billy Becker stared at me in astonishment. "How did you duck so fast?" he demanded. "Look at all the practice I've had," I replied, wondering if he was going to beat me up on Arnie's behalf. But he just squinted at me for a minute, then turned and walked away. Once Billy was gone, I sat down against the wall. "What happened?" I whispered to Snout. "What did you do?" "I am not the master of mental arts for nothing," he replied smugly. "That was an example of temporal disruption, one of my specialities." "What does that mean?" "I put you into a different time frame. In other words, I set things up so that time went more slowly for you than it did for your attacker. That gave you time to duck. It takes a great deal of energy, and I can't manage it for long, but it seemed a reasonable thing to do under the circumstances." "I'm glad you're on my side." "Don't be too glad," he replied. "Being on our side means that BKR is on the other side. He is a fierce enemy, and you seem to have enemies enough as it is." He paused, then added, "Perhaps we can help you with that while we're here." And that is just what he did for the rest of the day. For example, as we were heading in from the playground, I got a message through the transmitter in my ear. "Enemy approaching from behind. Duck left." As I stepped aside, Billy Becker went stumbling past with the next bug he'd been planning to add to his collection. He looked so astonished and frustrated that I almost felt sorry for him. As I thought about it, I did kind of feel bad. After all, I knew something that he didn't. At least, I assumed he didn't know his father was an alien. Or did he? Was that why he acted so weird all the time? Whether he knew or not, he was still in for an awful surprise if Gracker and company were successful. If they had their way, his father would be headed for the interplanetary Hoosgow. Of course, it was possible that Billy and his mother would just stay here, and Billy would be worse than ever. Now that was a revolting idea. After recess, we had math. Miss Maloney was starting a unit on dividing fractions, and it made almost no sense to me until Madame Pong started sending me explanations through my transmitter. This wasn't so bad. A couple of times I did have a problem understanding her because of some background noise. At first, I thought it was static. I finally realised what the noise had been when it came time to handing in my homework. It was the sound of someone chewing. What made me realise this was the fact that when I reached into my desk to pull out my math assignment, it looked like a lace doily. I stood up slowly, holding the tattered paper in front of me. "Oh dear," I heard Madame Pong whisper. "For heaven's sakes, Rod," snapped Miss Maloney. "Where's your assignment?" I swallowed hard, wishing I could lie. "Rod?" Glancing down at my desk, blushing, I mumbled, "Aliens ate my homework, Miss Maloney." I wish I could get a laugh like that when I tell a joke. My cheeks burning with embarrassment, I slumped in my chair. Gracker, of course, was furious.
"Saying that we ate your homework was in direct contravention of my orders,"
he raged that afternoon when we were back in my house. "It was brilliant," said Madame Pong serenely. Gracker turned to her in astonishment.
"What do you mean?"
What Snout did on the playground was likely to generate some suspicion. Rod's answer to his teacher sounded so absurd that it has distracted people from what is really happening. You might make a good diplomat, Rod, she added, turning to me. The creative use of truth is one of the most important of our skills. Besides, she continued, turning back to Gracker, if you had been able to control your appetite, the whole incident might have been avoided. I've been wondering which of them had actually eaten my math. Gracker growled, but I could tell that Madame Pong had scored a heavy point. The whole mess got put aside when Phil floated out of the circle and said, I think we've got it fixed. Let's go try her out. The plan was that the aliens would fly back to Seldom Seen, enlarge the ship and get on with their work. I knelt in front of my desk. I'm sorry about this afternoon, I said, and I really did appreciate the help you gave me dealing with Billy and Arnie.
It was our duty, said Gracker gruffly. After all, you are deputy of the Galactic Patrol.
It was our pleasure, said Madame Pong firmly. For some reason it felt better to think that they had helped me because they liked me, rather than just because they had to.
If all goes well, we will not see you again,
said Gracker, his voice stiff and formal.
Assuming that to be the case, let me thank you on behalf of the galaxy for the assistance you have rendered to date.
He stood for a moment, his big jaw grinding. Finally, Madame Pong nudged him with her elbow. With a sigh, he stretched out his hand and said, Please accept this small token of our gratitude. On his palm rested a circle of some material about the colour of my flesh. What is it? I asked. A patch for the hole in your ear, said Madame Pong with a smile. Here, let me put it on for you. Taking the circle from Gracker's hand, she floated to my shoulder. Taking out the gold stud, she applied the patch to my ear. There, she said, sounding satisfied. Go look. Madame Pong still on my shoulder, I went to my mirror. I stared at my ear in astonishment. You couldn't tell anything had happened to it. Thanks, I said happily. It was the least we could do, said Madame Pong. She flew back to join the others. Gracker gave me a salute. I saluted back, feeling kind of funny about having the little guys leave. They had only been here for a day, and certainly they had been more trouble than anything else. Yet in a strange way it had been fun having them around. I had certainly liked having Snout foil Billy's bug-squashing attempt during recess. Madame Pong made a bow to me. I bowed back. The 5 of them climbed into the circle. Wait until I open the window, I cried. Gracker's voice came through the speaker.
Hold flight until exit prepared, he said.
I opened the window. The ship shot past me. I watched it disappear among the trees of the swamp. Then I lay down on my bed and stared at the ceiling. I guess that old line about the best laid plans of mice and men applies to aliens too, because about 15 minutes later the Furkle flew back through my window. It was a good thing I hadn't bothered to close it. The Furkle landed on my desk. After a moment the ramp extended and Gracker stepped out. He was not a happy alien. What happened? I asked.
Nothing,
he said tensely. Sorry, boss, said Phil, floating down the ramp after Gracker. He was waving his leaves and vines about wildly, as if trying to explain something. I told you it might not work. Turning to me, the plant added, We're missing a vital part. In your language, it would be called... He paused and waved his leaves as if thinking. I think the technical word is doohickey, said Tar Gibbons. Either that or thingamy. It's also known as the focus diffusion gizmo because it either focuses or diffuses the enlarging ray, depending on the size of the ship. Usually, we just call it the FD gizmo. Right, said Phil. The FD gizmo. Anyway, Tar Gibbons and I tried to create a replacement, but we didn't get it right. No surprise, these things are tricky. But Meathead here thinks it's an interplanetary crime. I was astonished to hear Phil talk that way. Well, it was no surprise that he called Gracker a meathead. We were all meathead from a plant's point of view, but I figured he would be required to show a little more respect for his commanding officer. Madame Pong was next down the ramp. "I'm sorry, Rod," she said, bowing again. "It looks as if we'll have to ask your hospitality for another night." I smiled. To my surprise, I was actually glad to have them back. That night, I worked on repairing the hole the aliens had made of my volcano, while the aliens themselves worked on their ship. They told me stories while they worked. It was kind of cozy, reminded me of what it used to be like when my dad still lived with us. Actually, I guess it started when I asked Madame Pong a question about what she did. She responded by telling me this long story about growing up on her planet and having to harvest trailing wort mungle in order to earn money to go to school so that she could become a diplomat. That got the rest of them reminiscing about their childhoods. It was funny the things they had in common, and the things that were different. For example, nearly all of them had had problems with their brothers and or sisters. "Family problems are universal," said Phil, waving a leaf. "Take me. My brother was a real nut. And my sisters, what a bunch of fruits." Before I could figure out if he was joking, Tar Gibbons said, "I have no problems with brothers or sisters, because I have none." "Did you like being an only child?" I asked. "Oh, I wasn't an only child. I had several siblings. Just no brothers or sisters." "Wait a minute. Siblings are people who have the same parents as you do. So you had to have brothers or sisters?" "Brothers are male, correct?" I nodded. "And sisters are female." When I nodded again, Tar Gibbons spread his arms, leaned that long neck forward, blinked at me and said, "Then I don't have any." Well, that just doesn't make sense. I was starting to get a little angry, because I thought he was teasing me. "Why not?" "They have to be one or the other." "Oh, don't be silly. I am neither male nor female. I'm a farfel." "Is that more like a boy or more like a girl?" "Actually, it's more like a pipic than anything." I turned to Madame Pong, but she just spread her hands. "I don't think you want to get into a discussion of biology that is practiced on Tar Gibbons' planet." "Okay," I said. "Just tell me what pronoun to use when I'm talking about him. Her, it. I mean, see what I mean?" "It will do just fine," said Tar Gibbons. "What will do just fine?" "It will," he repeated. "What will?" "It. Refer to me as an it." "That seems pretty rude," I said nervously. "Not as rude as calling me a he or a she," it said. I sighed and turned back to my volcano. I had to think about this for a while. Before I could get another glob of papier-mâché on the frame, Gracker said, "I've made a decision." I turned to look at him. I got nervous whenever he said something like that. "Tomorrow, Rod will take us to BKR's house. We should look around inside." "I can't. I have to go to school." "No, you have to take us to BKR's house," replied Gracker calmly. "But if I don't go to school..." Well, you can imagine how that argument went. If I skipped school, I might get grounded for a while. If I didn't take the aliens to BKR's house, I would be hauled into space to stand trial for obstructing justice. Gracker might not play fair, but he almost always won his arguments. Madame Pong fished the little gold transmitter out of her pocket. "I guess we better put this back in your ear, Rod," she said. Flying to my shoulder, she peeled off the patch she had put over the hole Gracker had burned through my earlobe and reinserted the gold stud. Then she replaced the patch. "Perfect," she said. "No one will even know it's there." She had just flown back down to my desk when my door swung open and my mother walked in. The aliens froze. She walked over to the Ferkel. To my horror, she reached down and picked up Graka.